Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to CIBC Presents Entrepreneurship 101. I have been told to tell you there has been an overwhelming response to the first annual Mars Flying Cars competition. I'm going to let Peter talk about that. This is the second lecture in our series on marketing. For those of you who missed last week's stellar performance, it is, of course, on the website, and I'll refer you to that and to that for Peter's bio. And without any further ado, it's Act 2. Fasten your seatbelts again. Here we go for marketing.
Oh. That's what I get for talking with somebody in the back. Thanks, folks. Let's get started on Lecture 2. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a bit out of breath. I've just run from the back here. I want to get started. We got a lot of slides to go through tonight. And I am happy to say that everybody was quite engaged on the Flying Cars contest, our first annual at Mars. Hopefully one of a number of contests we have relative to innovation and great ideas and bad ideas and whatnot. So let's get started and get into this. I'm going to do a quick recap of where we've been in a number of areas here. In terms of what's on for tonight, it's going to be a recap of Lecture 1. We're going to continue our step-by-step overview of the marketing process and how it helps us transform ideas to income, which is really the theme of tonight's session. And we're also going to talk about some key marketing principles, best practices. We're going to bring up the case study at the end, the Flying Cars case study that we talked about. And we also have some workbook sections that will follow, which are available on the Mars portal, which we did in Lecture 1 as well, which are already posted up there, which hopefully helped you in some regard for the exercise that I gave you to think about last week. So how many people were here last week? Got a good crowd, probably 2/3 of the crowd. Okay, so good repeat attendance, which is something that a marketer would generally try to measure as a metric of some success. Let's do a quick recap, very, very quickly. We concluded last week, because Wikipedia says so, that innovation is good. We talked about innovation as being a process, which is not just about creativity, but it's fused. It's a process that transforms ideas to income. As well, we talked about ideas in that they are really, at the end of the day, a fanciful notion, an inkling, a conceptualization that really hasn't been grounded with any business measures and hasn't been grounded with any process and structure that can bring it to an income-producing stage. And that's something that we've critically examined in terms of the great ideas that we often think are great ideas until they get into business. We also talked about types of innovation that are out there and how it goes way beyond science and technology, the different types of innovation that you can think of, and many that are actually being extended these days into business processes, product systems, delivery channels are becoming bigger. Brand has gotten huge in the marketplace, given the clutter that's out there. And certainly it's not even a 500-channel universe anymore. It's far more with social media. And one other area that you certainly see is the customer experience, how customers interact with products in the marketplace and what they think of you and how they actually report back on that. The customer experience is becoming more important than ever. We talked a bit about how an investor sees marketing. I asked you last week how many of you are looking at financing a business or writing a business plan. The reason I ask that is that marketing, by definition, is very much responsible across many aspects of a new venture. And we talked about it being over 50% of the slides that you will find in the slide deck being related to the responsibilities of a marketer. Just an additional slide that I wanted to share with you that's fun. I was in the Valley a couple of months ago talking to the head of SFACE, which is the Silicon Valley Entrepreneurs Association. I just wanted to show you what's in the idea pool. If we just look at a very, I can't say small economy, but certainly the microcosm of Silicon Valley, if we want to describe it as that. 400,000 engineers and technologists, according to SFACE, in the Valley. 20,000 want to be entrepreneurs. 6,000 have business plans that they want to submit to VCs every year, that do get submitted to VCs. 350 of those business plans that are submitted to VCs in various forms become A-round investments. So that's It's generally 5 million or down for Web 2.0, 500 to infinity, quite frankly, if you're going into life sciences and biotech, semiconductors, and other sectors of the economy. What's interesting about that is that only 250 of those business plans on average have a first-time CEO at an A round financing. Now, this doesn't include angels. I want to put you at ease on this. It doesn't include friends and family. The 3 Fs, friends, family, and fools, and I don't put angels in the category of fools. I've done angel investments before. And they're very smart investors, becoming more like VCs all the time in terms of their ability to judge a good deal or not a good deal. I just want to show you what you're up against, because these are sobering stats. There's a lot of people with ideas out there. And what I'm about to talk to you about tonight, which is a recurrent theme, is that to get that idea to income and to get it funded, you've got to think about a number of things. We talked as well about this innovation paradox as I talk about it. The science and technology is only a starting point for a new business. It's not an end result. It needs a value proposition. After a market opportunity is quantified, you need a plausible distribution strategy, and you need a financial model to back that up. When we look at marketing, we think of the standard 4 Ps definition that I shared with you last week, and this is something that Phil Kotler at Northwestern pioneered, and is often that algorithm that most people run in their heads. And it has a lot of validity in terms of it being a serial process for you to think about marketing and how to move an idea through in a series of sequential stages. But it's very linear. One of the ways I'd like you to think about marketing is an innovation framework that I've developed that sort of rides on a lot of other really great innovation frameworks that have been out there. It's not all that groundbreaking. It's just really a better way and a very pragmatic way, I think, to think about marketing as an innovator. And I count you all as innovators, at least tonight. Another way to think about marketing in a strategic context is to actually scan your markets, filter out unrecoverable costs at a customer level, synchronize with your suppliers, partners, and networks in general, and also in that category I will put government, regulatory agencies, trade associations, people that can either work against you or with you, can potentially grease the wheels for your invention in a big way. Next, it's about amplifying against your competitors. It's about taking the signal that you've derived from the market in terms of the true customer requirements, not just the customer requirements that they say they want, because customers often don't know what they want. It's actually translating that and then amplifying it in an asymmetric way. It's zigging versus zagging in the market. It's actually amplifying with the signal that you have and bringing only those major things up in front of the market and letting them decide those market segments that you're going after. I'm going to talk quite a bit about this tonight, because it's really at the heart of innovation, I think, in this century. And last, it's about financial engines. It's about tuning the financial engine in the proper way so that you've actually got a business model that works, that it is aligned in terms of your costs and revenues and various other ways to ensure that you've got a profitable business. As we said, it's really not an ideas to income result unless you've got a profitable business. So, we've done the scanning, we've done the filtering, and now we're at synchronize. I want to talk a little bit about the way that synchronization works at stage 3 here of this model. It's basically looking across the whole category of battle, and it's looking at various ways that you can get to those customer segments. It's ways that you can actually work with key suppliers who have the ability to either help you produce a solution or to distribute it as channels, as ways to get to market faster. How can you best approach them? Is it a direct strategy to sell directly? Are you going to hire your own salespeople? Or are you going to work through an established player that already has a sales force that can get you to market? Are there syndicated networks that you can use to sell your product? Last week I talked about Amazon.com as being the pioneer of what we call the affiliate network in the web model. An affiliate network is a way to actually distribute your product on various websites. And when you click through to buy an Amazon book, chances are you don't go to Amazon as a destination. It's often a click-through that's originated in context on somebody else's site. So we're seeing an emergence of affiliate networks, syndicated networks where people have got partnerships to drive traffic to one another's sites. The value chain, if we look at the media industry, let's take advertising and media. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but this is here more as reference material to help you get a better understanding of how the category maps, how it breaks down if you're actually selling into an area like this. You've got your advertiser. An advertiser needs to work with a creative agency, an advertising agency. That advertising agency, inside that agency, or a separate entity that does media planning and buying, so they buy TV commercials, they buy banner ads on the web. Then there's content owners and producers. These are publishers that actually run that advertising in the magazine, on the website, on the TV station. And then media aggregators and distributors, and these are people that are all the way through the broadcast chain, all the way down to the consumer. What really bothers me when I don't see a business plan that shows a category map of where a product fits, something that you've invented. It's something that really suggests to me that you haven't really thought about where you fit in this whole market. Let's look at a couple of others. And again, these are references. This is the petroleum industry value chain. And what I mean by that is this is all the way from exploration, finding oil, the geologist tapping into rocks in the field, all the way through to when you buy your coffee at Tim Hortons. Where do you think the money is right now? It's actually in real estate. A lot of the money that a lot of the petrochemical companies are seeing, a lot of the margins, a lot of the growth is coming through doing real estate deals, licensing deals with Tim Hortons and various other players. It's actually sundry items, because in many cases, to some of the biggest players and most profitable, successful companies in the US, the gas is just another one of those items that they sell. They're more of a retailer. And it's ironic. I mean, you see more going on, and gas almost seems like an afterthought to some of these places now. Who would have thought that 15 years ago it really would have seemed weird to actually buy your coffee at the same place? But somebody came up with the brilliant idea that there is a way for the petroleum industry to start moving across the value chain into retail. This is very important to know. When you look at value chains, you have to understand that incumbents, these are the people that own the market that you may be looking to steal market share from, may want to move into the territory that you want to create as an inventor. So you've got to be careful of them forward integrating across the value chain, as we say, and actually coming in and potentially competing against you. This is a value chain that I looked at in many ways back with a venture I was with, Flow Network. And this is the e-marketing industry in circa 2000. We didn't cover the whole area, but what we could show investors as part of a NASDAQ filing to go public, this is the kind of stuff that they're looking at. And then they're analyzing how well can you play in those sections, those orange sections that you say you're going to be dominant in. And how are you going to do it through a supply chain of integrated partners? How are you going to sell into those areas of the value chain through value-added channel partners as well to distribute your product? As well, when you're starting to think about synchronizing with the market, you've got to look at the suppliers of your product, whether they're components or whether they're sales channels, as to what they bring to the party in completing something Jeff Moore calls the whole product solution. The whole product solution is a beautiful way to actually think about all of the components that needs to go in there. You can't sell software, although some companies think this way, that they can, without some degree of customer service, unless you've got a completely self-serve product that's so intuitive that the FAQ can take over and service customers. You may need a call center. That's part of the after-sales support. You may need Tier 1 and Tier 2 call center support. That's part of the product. You've got to look at all of these areas around selling the product. You've got to look at pre-sale support. Does the customer need help in deciding whether or not that product fits with their technical requirements and such, all the way through. So as a point of reference, you've got to make sure that you've got all of this stuff covered to give yourself a whole product solution, as Moore would call it. Let's go into Amplify, because I'm actually going to spend the majority of today's talk, especially as it relates to flying cars, in the Amplify phase, which is where we're really bringing a lot of things together to actually zig in the market versus what our competitors are doing, which is a zag strategy. We're fundamentally wanting to go against the market in an overweight way to basically deliver unexpected value to customers. We've already tested for unrecoverable cost. We know where it is. We've stripped it out of our product, and now we're going to amplify and go big, put an overweight amount of emphasis on the things that we believe they care about that our competitors have not thought about. You got that? It's a very, very important point. How can you delight customers on elements of the product or service where the quality can be raised? Where can you create new elements of the product? Where can you deliver a sustainable advantage in this area? We're going to talk quite a bit about it tonight as to how a number of these companies focus on what I call flipping points. You've heard of Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point. Let's call this a flipping point for fun here. Flipping points are those critical areas that we have where we can look at a product and say that it's maybe doing too much in the market. It's delivering too much quality. Remember we talked about value equals perceived quality divided by perceived price? If you want to bring price down, well, perhaps you've got to bring quality down to meet that too. It's a dynamic model of shifts where you want to actually be testing at 1.0 or higher than 1.0. And how you do it is this. The top two, according to Kim and Malborn from Blue Ocean Strategy fame, one of the better business books that I would highly recommend you read as required reading if you're bringing a product to market. If you're responsible in any way for some of these activities that we talk about in marketing, buy this book and read it. Eliminating products or eliminating factors that an industry takes for granted is important. Reducing factors that an industry takes for granted in a product is important as well. And there's ways to also raise and create. Let's take circuses, for example. The example I've got up here is very simple. I like circuses. They're kind of a fun example. What's the one thing about Cirque du Soleil, and you can probably tell from this chart here, that makes a big difference in the model in their cost structure? Anybody? What's the single biggest expense, that they've taken out of their model? No animals. It creates a dynamic model. No animals means no PETA demonstrators. That's a fun part. There's no insurance. There's no food to buy for the animals. There's no increased transportation cost. There's liability potentially for the handlers. I could go on. I don't know if anybody saw that video on the news a while back of a couple of elephants on the East Coast that were actually had lost their way because the truck had flipped over, and it was a circus truck with a couple of elephants. I think it was in Cape Breton or somewhere. It's just highly irregular, but animals have got to be transported. Eliminating animal shows is one way that Cirque du Soleil can actually raise and create, delivering a unique venue in their Vegas facilities and around the world in these purpose-built theaters with hydraulic stages and stuff. It's a very, very expensive experience to put on. But one of the ways that they're doing it is by value reallocation. It's taking that cost and reallocating it in other areas that their audience really believes is making Cirque du Soleil special. They've also reduced the amount of thrills and danger because the format of their performances is not about people being shot from cannons and various other nasty things that could happen to people. It's also another way that, again, like animals, reduces cost in the whole show. And also what they've done is they've created artistic music and dance. They've created an individual production in each one of the shows. Now, how many people have been to Cirque du Soleil? A lot of people. So it sort of shows just how successful they've been. It's a billion-dollar industry now. What they've essentially done is created a Broadway show and brought the best elements of a circus to the Broadway show and fused it together to create a new category of player out there, which is really quite unique. What they've essentially done then, it can be graphically illustrated. If you look at a traditional circus, this is what I would call a value curve or a strategy canvas for the traditional circus industry. Cirque du Soleil comes in and essentially creates a major delta. You see how on the price? Is Cirque du Soleil getting a premium price or a low price? It's premium. Is there animals? No. It's one of the ways they can actually save a lot of money and get a premium price because what they're essentially doing on the back end is actually delivering a whole pile of other things. They are eliminating animal shows. They're reducing thrills and danger, and you can see the delta associated with each one of these activities, with the unique venue and with artistic music and dance. They are zigging when everybody else zags. They are doing asymmetric warfare here, so to speak, as the Pentagon would say. It's asymmetric and goes against what anybody else is really thinking about in a traditional circus context. So what do we need to do? We have to be very careful with this because if we actually break from the pack and we're creating a new category in some cases like Cirque du Soleil, for large-scale innovation, category creation, as opposed to incremental improvements in the circus experience. We've got to be very, very careful about something called unexpected value. We need to focus on it very big. Apple understands unexpected value very well. Certain things like the U2 version of the iPod, that edition, and custom gift engraving really don't generate an incredible amount for Apple in terms of how it affects consumer demand. Do you use the Apple iPod for games? Is it really a chosen weapon of gamers? No, not at all. In fact, they suck, the games on there. But that's not what it's about. It's really just there in case you're stuck on a plane. And that actually happened to me one day with, I think it was the parachute game where you shoot the parachutes down. And I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. I didn't know it was there. But I was on the flight for 3 hours at LaGuardia. And I think that's why they put it there, just in case you're ever in an emergency. But its primary use as an iPod is really for iTunes integration. It's for syndicated distribution. And it's for the actual organization of your music so that it fits your lifestyle in terms of the genres that you want to play and the playlists that you have. Ironically, what is necessary, because it's relevant to people today, but not very well differentiated, is what's become a commodity and where companies like the SanDisk folks have been stuck for some time. It's on storage. Storage worth a lot to people these days? Anybody got a 2 gig USB key in their pocket? I mean, those things were worth $100 just, 18 months ago. I might even be a little bit high on that. Storage has become a commodity. Apple's been on top of this. Their competitors fundamentally have missed the point that it's about bigger, game-changing moves that are both relevant and differentiated. The other thing that you've got to do in this phase is you've got to create a movement. What I mean by that, it's about positioning to win through what I call symbols of reevaluation. And in fact, that's not my term. Full disclosure here, Adam Morgan, who wrote one of the most amazing books on advertising called Eating the Big Fish, has been a major influence on the way that I think about brand advertising and how you cut through the clutter and actually develop a connection with consumers and with business customers. You can actually develop symbols of reevaluation in many categories. We see them out there with the easy button. You know you've made it as a marketer if people are actually selling easy buttons in the stores. It's pretty impressive. Enough said. Anybody recognize the cartoon? The reason I use the cartoon here is because they could run that at Christmas time. And how many people know what this is? Everybody. There's nobody that's been under a rock or a bubble, a hermetically sealed bubble. Enough said. This is a very, very powerful symbol of good and evil for Apple users. This is a very, very powerful symbol of simplicity versus complexity. This is a very, very powerful symbol of freedom and great design versus stick it to the man and command and control. And I'll stop right there before Dave Crow gets all medieval on my ass. On the software side, we've seen some amazing moves by a company called Salesforce.com, which I may have talked about before, really a pioneer in the software as a service industry and in the application service provider industry. But they basically said, we're not software, which ironically, it wasn't a lie, but it was a very big fabrication to not call themselves software. But all they were trying to do was challenge mentally and engage you as a consumer or as a business customer in the construct of how we think about software. And rather than have a big intellectual discussion about what an application service provider framework is and about software as a service, they actually got people to really stand up and take notice. Now you got my attention. Okay, what was that you wanted to talk to me about application service provider, software as a service, free trialability? Okay, now we can talk. This is what great brands do. They're great file folders. They're mental file folders that people can reach for and associate with very fast. They cut through the clutter, and it's something that I heartily encourage you to think about as you're thinking about developing brands. This is one of mine. We ran this ad in Fortune magazine and many other business publications with a fairly large ad budget that I had at a company called Flow Network at the height of the .com boom. And as I say here, even small software startups can be cheeky. We developed our own set of symbols for an old traditional direct marketing industry. And this debuted at a convention called the Direct Marketing Convention that has about 100,000 people at it. And it was really one of the talks of the convention. We had letters from people, even consumers that were reading Fortune magazine, saying, how could you? And we knew we touched a nerve. What we were trying to do was challenge the conventional thinking of an industry that had traditionally referred to itself as stamp lickers. They're direct marketers. They do postal direct mail. That's typically what they've done for years, and it was a billion-dollar business. But to challenge their thinking, we said, stop licking stamps, and this is how we got through to them. And this became a visual metaphor for a series of campaigns in talking to the market. It got us traction in the New York Times and various other outlets, Inc. magazine, lots of different places, that a coordinated advertising effort that we put on using this as a framework got. The other thing I want to talk about that I'm very big on when it comes to actually cutting through the clutter and playing in an asymmetric way, going against the grain, is to engage people in visual thinking. Has anybody heard of X-Plane before? Any of the agencies that do visual thinking? Good. Basically, visual thinking is a way to engage right-brain thinkers. One of the things that I see often is business plans that fail to explain their solution in a really intelligent way where I can get it. And a picture does speak 1,000 words. This is an actual picture of a diagram that I got from my engineering department in 1999. And within 3 months, we'd re-engineered this for the market because this is an engineering schematic. It's not how the customer thinks about the product. When I took over, I needed to do 2 things with the market, and this is how I briefed the agency that helped us construct this in St. Louis. I said, there's 2 things I need. One is I need a really, really intelligent way to show what the hell my product is. What is it? These are all the components of what we had at the time, which was an application service provider framework. Basically, people on the back end, professional services consulting, a big cage, as we say, co-located at UUNet, which is a big set of rack SMTP servers to send mail out on behalf of companies like Barnes & Noble, Continental Airlines, and CNET. This is permission-based email that we did. So we sent out, for instance, the entire frequent flyer database for Continental Airlines. Their OnePass members got all their frequent flyer offers and their miles statements by email using this framework. But how does it work was the next question we had to get out into the market. This is how the customer interacts with the product. And what visualization does, hear me on this, it Disneyfies your product. It engages a whole class of very important top officers that we talked about last week. Those vetoes, the people that are often decision makers for the product or service that you're trying to sell them. In many cases, this is the blink test. It's not an elevator pitch in many cases. I know a number of executives that would not actually, you can't hold their attention for an elevator ride. People don't have time to learn anymore. So you must accommodate those potential buyers. Yes? It is actually, and it's credited at, this one isn't, the other one is, but the graphics by X-Plane in St. Louis. And I've been a client multiple times with X-Plane, in fact, on their advisory board. So a big fan. XPLANE.com if you want to see more of this stuff and some ideas on how to more visually express your product, especially if you're in B2B, especially if it's a complex solution with a lot of moving parts. Think about it. What does it do? What is it? And lastly, we even took this stuff and dumped it into our prospectus. I won't say dumped, but very carefully crafted it to put it into an SEC filing for NASDAQ. And we actually got positive comments back from the SEC in 2000 saying that they, in 2001 actually, that they had never actually seen a prospectus with visual thinking and credited us for the wonderful way that our product was represented because it helped the examiners better understand how to judge this, the documents. So lastly, we're going to get to the tuning, and then we're going to get into a case study. Very quickly, the tuning is about money. It's financial. It's a very big part of this. And most innovators these days should be thinking about that if they're not in an R&D facility. Many entrepreneurs have really got to think about how they optimize their revenue and costs. So at the financial stage, what we're very preoccupied here with is the way that we get paid. It's the royalties. It's the upfront licensing costs that we may generate on our product. We're going to talk a little bit about one of the products in the case study around flying cars and how they're generating money even before the products come out. They've just got a prototype that they're selling off right now because it increases their cash flow. That really helps. So getting pre-orders. Are there upfront payments, deposits? How are you going to get paid at the end of the day? And do partners need to be paid? One of the things that I find often in pricing exercises with entrepreneurs is they haven't built in enough margin to actually pay people to sell the product. But at the same time, they're telling me that they intend to get a sales channel employed to sell the product later, and there's no margin. There's no wiggle room to actually go to market with. Very important, especially for the accountants in the audience. Market sizing, as we get into the financial side, is again taking that value chain and understanding how it breaks out in terms of subcategories. I often see people saying, well, the advertising industry is huge and we're going to get 1% of all entire ad industry over a 5-year period. Well, that's a huge number, but it doesn't do a lot for an investor to understand just exactly where you're going to play in this. It's a $283 billion industry, according to Universal McCann, their most recent estimates. But you've got to break it down more, and this is a good example. Let's go back to the petroleum industry. I know this is a rather boring example, but it's one of the few ones I've seen that is this detailed in terms of how money gets made in the petroleum industry. It's really 3 major areas. There's upstream, there's downstream, and there's taxes. And I think there's death as well. I think it was Ben Franklin that said that, I think. The 4th component there that's not shown on the diagram. But basically all this chart says is there are industry shifts, and over a 30-year period we've seen some movement in who makes what amount of money. But I'd like you to use this as a template for how you organize the category that you want to play in and how you think about it, because it's very important. You also have to get the mix right. I often see people get somewhat distracted seeing what Google's doing as a good example out there in many areas, like Google TV. They're doing a number of things like Orkut, some of their social media stuff. They're into Wi-Fi. One thing that's not reflected here that I know they're into, I'm sure of it, digital signage. It's not there, but it still represents all of those things, a distraction from a financial point of view. These are large-scale R&D projects that may be underway, but it still doesn't pay the bills at Google. Google understands how its bread is buttered. It's 70% search and advertising. This is actually how they spend their time in terms of product development. As well, what we often want to see from entrepreneurs is what's the revenue model, the financial model that they have down to a science, how they make money. Google knows its ratios. How many users, the amount of queries per user, the ads per query, the clicks per ad, and the all-important revenue per click. What's neat about this is in the Google annual statements. This is actually public. This is no secret formula to how Google makes money. They actually are quite free to share that. And it's a model that makes money on the buy side and the sell side beautifully. It's a 2-sided market. And you get your search services for free, and if you want additional storage on your Gmail, you pay for additional storage. That's the freemium model. You basically trade up. It's free to a point. It's a beautiful model. When we think about estimating our revenue forecast, so the one thing that I'm always careful about is something that's very evil. It's called non-consumption. Very evil for marketers. It's people that don't buy. You know, figures, not to poke fun at academics, but we'd actually give it a term, non-consumption. We've identified people that haven't bought and they're non-consumers. It's just a funny way to actually put it. But if you look at all these solutions, they all have a functional specification, and that's to get the child from point A to point B. And you can actually see that the price points on these actually fall in 3 different areas, and there's a huge amount of variability in price when you look at this. At the end of the day, it's really understanding the real determinants of value at the end of the day before you set your pricing model. I'll leave you with that. We're going to get into the case study in a second. Lastly, the pricing research, some of the things you want to look at is the model that you set in the marketplace. Do you want to be a premium product? Do you want to be the lowest price? Do you want a blended model, which is more a mixture of operational excellence and product leadership? And it focuses more on a channel strategy. And as well, what are some of the other factors that you need to consider? And we've talked quite a bit about that already in terms of your channel costs and such. So let's get to some fun stuff around the flying cars. Why are they not taking off? Well, I'm going to share with you some of the things that actually came in on the contest. We also had a bonus round here. If we were to ask the right questions to profitably redefine the category of personal aviation, what would they be? So why no flying cars? So let's just read a couple here. So a couple of things that came in. I thought one of the coolest things that came in from, this was from Christine. I won't use last names here because I don't have permission to read these out. She said that she didn't see any future in flying cars, but saw a really interesting potential here for amusement park rides, where it could actually be a novelty. So I don't know, there might be a business model in that, who knows? But I found that quite amusing in terms of how some people were revectoring this, saying that you could maybe put this to good use. Another person said that it might put airliners out of business. Many people described it as a fantasy, talking about the market not really being groomed in terms of infrastructure that will allow it to come out in our lifetime. I thought that what was interesting, somebody picked up the fact that a lot of people that would buy these flying cars, presumably the inventor, Paul Bueller, is thinking that they will not want to get a pilot's license. But the one thing I'd tell you, there's an old saying, in the game of ham and egging, the chicken is involved, but the pig is committed. Think that through. And I would submit to you that flying is a little bit different than actually getting in a car, because in a car you can actually be doing an awful lot of things, and we know this. Some people are on their rims and a cell phone at the same time, potentially looking at the GPS and talking to some kids in the back seat. I mean, they can be multitasking. But from what I know in talking to pilots and reading about what it's like to fly a plane, you really do need to have your wits about you. I mean, just talk to Sully, from last week, the American Airlines pilot or the US Air pilot. So what's interesting is that this whole notion of mixing cars and planes together has sort of emerged in a lot of the thinking here, saying, aren't they two separate things? And I'm happy to say that a lot of the students picked up on that there is sort of a chicken and a pig here. In some ways, you are the pig when you get into a plane. You just hope you get out at the end of the day, because you are truly committed when you go out. The thing I want to actually read here is one that I thought was the winner, or is the winner. And I want to first read a couple of things from this. Hey, Peter, thanks for the homework. So about the flying cars, I think it's about the best example I've ever seen of feature creep. I can see the engineering meeting now. Hey, why don't we put a cooler in the floor? No, wait, let's put two. No, let's make a tent that attaches right onto the back of the vehicle, like the Pontiac Aztec. He must have been reading into my slides, because we're going to talk about that in a second. No, guys, I got it. Let's make it fly. Thing is, if you want a cooler to take my soft drinks to a soccer game, I'll buy a cooler. If I want to go camping, I'll buy a tent. I can throw either of these into my buddy's car too. And the reason why people buy cars is to get them to the soccer game, to the campsite, to work, to the mall. They want to get there comfortably, safely, and especially these days, cost effectively. The market for cool is a small one, and coolers and tents both fall under that category. Flying car is way more cool than it is a car, and the fact that there's no infrastructure is a problem. And pretend I'm not even mentioning licensing and insurance. You couldn't even use one, even if you could afford to buy one. So you've killed off the number one feature of the car that people look for, the fact that it gets you around. So I want to congratulate the winner of our contest, Brad Kennedy. I'm hoping he's here. Some people said they couldn't come this week, but they'd be dialing in later. So have we got Brad Kennedy here? Cool. Stand up for a second. Take a bow. Nice. The reason I'm excited about this one, and many others that I got, I mean, this was overwhelming. That's why I was actually late getting in the room today, was going through all the tabulations, and working with PricewaterhouseCoopers to get all that done was quite a tough experience. But the reason I'm excited is what Brad's really gone to is the heart of the innovation and some of the concepts that we talked about last week, which is all about buyer utility. It often is one of the biggest disconnects between that journey of ideas to income. Let's get started in this. I've actually made up some of my own reasons. Toronto Island residents have a secret ground-to-air missile system. We just haven't seen it yet. They're ready to fire at the first flying car. A further conspiracy theory, they're at Area 51, we just don't see them. The OPP can't figure out how to deal with air rage. GTAA, the Greater Toronto Airport Authority, is still trying to understand how they can charge for parking. The cup holder designs and engineering are not testing well. And the last one, the number one on our list, Tim Hortons hasn't figured out how to modify their drive-through locations. But So let's get more serious about this and run it through the 5-point model. It's not on trend. Biggest problem probably of all is that the highway in the sky that the NASA folks have to pioneer to make cars not collide with one another under the Paul Moeller theory design is just not there. There's no viable platform for it to dock with, and there doesn't appear to be any political pressure, let's say even under an Obama administration, to build infrastructure for flying cars. There is a lot of infrastructure that's going to fly, but trust me, I don't think NASA is going to be getting something that will allow it to commercialize this flight system of navigation. From a customer point of view, it fails to score on key requirements of buyer utility for personal aircraft. I call it a Blade Runner-like vehicle. It's a nice to have, there's a lot of cool factor, but it really doesn't work at the end of the day for buyers. We're going to talk a bit about what buyers might want and how a suitable substitute is there. Suppliers, partners, and networks, the biggest problem is that we need new GPS navigation systems. Not GPS per se, but navigation systems to work with GPS signals. And the Skycar is built on a very dangerous premise that entire supply chain and even the partner distribution chain is going to be built out to enable a mass purchase of these. And ironically, the financial model, to just fast forward for a second, is that it's built on large economies of scale. Moeller's saying that he's going to get this thing down to somewhere around $40,000. I'm trying to understand that. It seems like fantasy to me because the thing has 8 engines. And when you start looking at the cost of engines, there's an awful lot of unrecoverable costs versus many other designs that are out there that don't have vertical takeoff and landing, that only rely on one engine. Far easier to maintain and build. And last, one of the things on the competitive side is that there are other substitutes. We talked about that in the first lecture. There are substitutes for the product. There are reasons why people won't budge. Let's take helicopter pilots. The ones that I've talked to, including a friend of mine who flies Griffins in the Canadian military and is an impressive pilot, said it probably won't be in his lifetime that he would get into something that experimental. They're very pragmatic, people that go up in the air. Remember, they're committed. So one of the things that you've got to worry about here is the VTOL helicopters, and the VTOL experience is actually plagued with problems if you look at the Osprey test flights and many others that the Pentagon has done. One of the major problems that it's also going to have is that the concept of transportability is going to come into play with a new FAA category that's just been created in the sport license area and sport aircraft. And I'm going to talk about that now. When we did the lecture last week, in the morning, one of my colleagues, Kevin Downing, handed me a piece of paper and he said, "Hey, you're doing something on flying cars, right? Did you see this Terrafugia out of MIT?" And a number of you have sent cards and letters in and emails talking about the Terrafugia, going, it's pretty cool, but I don't think anybody's really getting it completely. And I'm in that camp as well. But it's ironic. I had this pretty much developed before the Terrafugia came out, and now I had to analyze another product. I didn't have a lot of time to analyze it between last Wednesday when a lot of the major news about it came on the wire. But I did get a chance to look at it and think a little bit about how it fits from a category point of view in the personal aviation market that's ready for a breakout. This is the Terrafugia, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's out of MIT, and it's basically a flying car with retractable wings. And you drive to the airport, and you take off, and you touch down, and then you drive home right into your garage. It does not take avgas. It does regular. I'm hoping they're asking for premium here. For gas, is a major breakthrough for planes that don't need specialized avgas. There's a distribution issue trying to get avgas for a plane like this if one of its main benefits is you don't really have to be tethered to an airport in the same way. But that is kind of the problem in many ways. Although he's fueling up here, this thing still needs to go to an airport to take off under FAA regulations. Unless you're in some third world banana republic on an airstrip where there really isn't any regulations. I could see this fitting a number of very interesting niches in the third world potentially. But then we have the problem with third world roads. Again, you're driving along, you're a chicken, you're involved. But all of a sudden, this thing's got to go into the air. How roadworthy is it? That's okay if it's not roadworthy and it breaks down. But airworthy is a whole different bar that gets set. This is a hybrid vehicle, not of the Prius sort, but of, in terms of applications, it may be trying to do too much like this. I feel a metaphor coming on. There's an old saying in marketing, beware of Swiss Army knives, because they do fly in meetings sometimes. But all kidding aside, you want to be careful that you don't build too many things into the solution, because what can happen is you don't do any one thing really well in the market. And that's what you want to be known in the market as doing, something really well. That's Google in the market. That's Yahoo. I'm not going to pick on Yahoo, but one of the reasons why Yahoo missed a grand opportunity in the whole search market was because of their approach to how they actually dangle applications in front of the consumer. I'm going to show you a really wonderful image that I found. I'm going to get to it in a second. Actually, let's do that now. Simplicity sells. It's the importance of a focused product. And we look at Google with 65% market share versus Yahoo with 21. This is Yahoo over the ages from 1998 to 2005. It's a yard sale from a usability point of view. Look at Google, how it's maintained a nice simplicity. What do we go to Google for generally? It's the first thing that comes to mind. Mental file folder. Got it, search. 100% of the room. Problem is that Yahoo's got search buried into an entire user experience and somehow expects to maintain market share. That's just not the way that that buyers buy. And when we go back to the usability, we look at the high priestess, as she's been described, of usability at Google, who's a brilliant marketer, certainly somebody that I look to for guidance in this market. She's very impressive, Marissa Mayer. She's head of all the user experience stuff around usability. And she talks about Google as being a complicated Swiss Army knife that's always tucked in. It's never sprawled out like Yahoo. You just bring stuff out when you need it. So there's a lot of great applications there. The motto of this here is that simple is good, that committees can actually kill great products by inventing too many features, because by the time you appease people in the committee structure, the people sitting around the kitchen table, if it's entrepreneurs, you sometimes you lose your way. Sometimes you need a leader. Could even describe them as a tyrant. Somebody like Marissa Mayer, who does stand-up meetings on product development at Google. Some of the folklore about how she does stuff at Google and the way that she is razor sharp on what will and will not get into the Google user experience. These are tales of folklore now. Steve Jobs is another one that has been known to actually steer the engineers back to the drawing board and say, it's not simple enough. And if you look at the simplicity and the function of their products, it's reflected in the leadership that people like Marissa Mayer at Google and Steve Jobs are showing. So let's go further on this. Locally here, RIM is a poster child for simplicity as well. I think many of you know this, but you can't talk about product simplicity and success without doing the Google story for a second. Mike Lazaridis is one of the founders of RIM, has constantly been asked at trade shows and by people in industry, when are you going to move beyond the keyboard and when are you going to move to touchscreen? And we certainly know that the Storm is their first major foray into that, and that'll present some challenges as they move to a new platform, and there'll be a lot of innovation in that area. Don't count Google or RIM out on that. But what's interesting is that he has said for many years that QWERTY really is, at the end of the day, the QWERTY keyboard was the next big thing for RIM, because a lot of their products were built on a QWERTY platform specifically to do one thing: best-in-class email. It's an email-centric device. It was supported by a keyboard, not by a pen. And it had all of the requisite security and enterprise server features that were built in that made IT departments feel safe. So the enterprise integration supported by the keyboard and just a maniacal focus on things like battery life, on usability like email. These are the kind of decisions that have been made at RIM that have actually benefited them versus other players in the market. If I look at the Windows Mobile experience, they have actually in some cases lost their way, and I've talked to a number of people in the industry that believe that Microsoft almost needs to reinvent itself in the category with Apple coming in a big way with the iPhone. They've almost lost their slot, at least right now. While BlackBerry still remains the choice of the President of the United States, he won't give it away. The estimates on the branding with Obama are worth upwards of $100 million in brand equity value, earned media value, just through all of the exposure that RIM has gotten with Obama, by the way. Just a nice little tidbit. What's the primary benefit of the flying car? Let's get back to primary benefit. Anybody? Okay. Hold that thought for a second. I'm going to give you one more primer because I don't hear anything yet. What's that? Not tied to a road. Beautiful. Okay, we're coming up to that. Let's just do one more example to get you thinking. Even products that suck are perfect for innovation. Hoover. What has Hoover done for us lately? Can anybody name any really cool brand that Hoover's brought out that just sort of resonates? Anybody own a Hoover? A vacuum? What's interesting is, have you heard of the others? What's the product that iRobot brings out? The Roomba? And Dyson is sort of a Dyson. They don't really have a trade name for it, but they've also got a portable out there. And Black & Decker, what have they got? Dustbuster. What's interesting is that the new growth in mature categories comes from focus. Focus requires discipline. It requires sacrifice. Here are the trade-offs that consumers are doing in their heads under the surface. They're not thinking about this. This is subliminal. iRobot is all about, basically, for those of you that don't know iRobot, it's battery powered. It goes right to its charging stand every night automatically. It sits there, and at a specific time, usually at night, it basically wakes up and goes around and vacuums a house for you based on preset patterns that you've allowed it to learn. It goes around furniture, it's got sensors, it's beautiful. I remember being in Ottawa at a board meeting with a whole pile of our directors watching the Roomba, which went off by mistake one day, and it had us mesmerized. A bunch of guys, you know. We're supposed to be doing a board meeting, and we're just watching this Roomba for like 5 minutes. It was just cool. It's the first time I'd ever seen it. The automation attribute is powerful with the Roomba. The Dyson is about performance. What's the TV commercial say about the Dyson? It doesn't lose suction. It's actually one of the few products I know that's being advertised as sucking more than any other product, and it's working for them. Black & Decker is all about portability. It also recharges, but it's actually picking up those spills, you know, in those little spots where you've got something you've got to clean up right away. There's an immediacy to the product. The trade-off, though, that needs to be made is that the Roomba may miss some of the tight corners when it's going around in an automated fashion while I'm sleeping at night. But that's okay, because I'm lazy. The Dyson may not clean my house automatically and wake up at night, but that's okay, because it doesn't lose suction. Or as Lord Dyson, like, it doesn't lose suction. I love how he says it on TV. The Black & Decker, from a portability, is okay as well. It doesn't have the performance of a Dyson, but that's okay. It has just enough performance to do the job that needs to be done at the time that somebody spilt the cornflakes in the wrong place, my 3-year-old. Is there one thing that the Terrafugia that we saw earlier, the flying car from MIT, does really well? Is there one thing? Anybody? Bueller? Bueller? Status symbol. It's good. Collector's item. I'll meet you halfway on that. Yes, sir. Avoids traffic? Yeah, I mean, you could fly over some of the congested areas, but where do you have to go for it to take off? You're just going to pull off the road and pop the wings down and take off? No. It's a party trick at the end of the day. It's not reality, I mean, to actually fly over traffic. And traffic often, you don't know where it's going to be, right? I mean, where the congestion is going to be. Is there an attractive market segment that cares? These are the questions that marketers need to ask. Sorry?
Well, the techies, I mean.
The techies. Nerds? Are you calling them nerds? Oh boy. I put words in your mouth. I'm just being funny. If you look at the guys in the pictures, I got to say, the guys from MIT, I'll let you decide on that. At the end of the day, going back to this question, is there a segment that cares about the Terrafugia? The market will decide. I'm not here to decide their fate. The market will always. That's the one thing that we can always be assured of, like death and taxes. If you agree that the personal aviation model sucks right now and is due for a reinvention, what do you do? Okay, so I'm going to take you through a product that I don't think sucks at all, at high speed, and I'm going to show you one of the coolest things I've seen in some time. My thoughts about this case study were the Detroit Auto Show. And then I thought about flying cars. Then I started to do some research, and I came across actually an article in Wired. And so this is actually not all that groundbreaking. By the time it hits Wired, ironically enough, it's generally products have seen a fair amount of airplay. But it was launched at the Oshkosh Air Show, which is the big show where you launch stuff, in June of this year. So a lot of the stuff is fairly contemporary. I'm going to go back to primary benefits, and I'm going to tell you what I think the customer might be looking for. And again, this is not a well-researched case study. This is really just playing with some of the marketing concepts to illustrate how this might work and how you might want to think about reinventing the category of personal aviation. How do you best achieve what the customer really wants? Are they looking for portability, move the airplane around very easily? Are they looking for floatability, the ability in an amphibious way, I guess there is no other way if it floats, to get on the water and stay on the water? The Terrafugia is what I call a roadable. It's actually what they coin, a roadable. And lastly, there's the vertical sky car, which is the VTOL, the vertical takeoff and liftoff, that Dr. Paul Moeller is pioneering or trying to pioneer. Now let's take this through. What do customers want? This is made up. I just made this up as if I was doing a focus group with a bunch of people that would like to be pilots or people that are pilots right now. And these are some of the things they might say. A lot of dribble. Want to go to the cottage, not a boater, like to fish, it gets me places, worried about price, hate the Cessna 172 that my dad owned. It's a tin can built on a 1955 platform. They're boring, it smells. You can hear all sorts of comments. I'm not implying that everybody's Cessna smells, but I'm sure something that hadn't been refurbished since 55 might. At the end of the day, this is how we gather user requirements and we listen to customers. If we use outcome-based research and we were to start looking at the jobs to be done, this actually provides a better way to categorize what the customers are really telling us so that our engineers can start building the right stuff. And ironically, when you do this, this is something pioneered by Tony Ulwick, who's a value theorist, who actually says when you do the questions, the way you want to measure performance up or down is minimizes or maximizes. That way you can ignore some of the sample bias that comes out of your research. But a lot of that free-flowing information that you get in your research when you're talking to prospective customers or people with those, remember, points of pain, can actually be crafted in this way. We're talking about the ability to save time, have more fun, go faster, better performance, maneuverability, the freedom to return home when I want to, which is an important part of the flying experience. Many people will tell you if you're pressed for time, the worst thing you could do is be a pilot. And it's true. There's an incredible amount of downtime with flying. And if you cut corners, you die often. There's an incredible amount of pilot error as a result of cutting corners. It's usually not mechanical failures. There's an incredible amount of safety to the flying experience that people need. Mechanical failure, The associated risk of using pontoons on a boat, if you actually want to land on water, that's a whole different price range. That's a whole different training. I think it's, don't quote me on this, I think it's another 20 hours of flight instruction. Then you've got to fly up to the Muskokas or wherever with your instructor and, and actually go through a whole level of training with them. There's the cost to purchase, to operate, to maintain. There's all these things that are going through people's heads as to whether or not they want to even try flying, let alone stay flying. And we're looking at areas like fun, time, performance, convenience, comfort, and safety. Remember V equals Q over P, value equals quality divided by price? This is the equation that people are running in their heads. A lot of these questions need to be addressed. And a lot of these questions are ranked in certain orders among the buyers. Some are real hot buttons for customers, others are not. Let's have a little bit of fun. Remember I talked about relevance and differentiation and how Apple actually groups products in this manner. Looking at this, you could actually take the portable, floatable, rotatable, and vertical and say, it's kind of interesting, the rotatable over here is actually the Terrafugia. And I would contend this is where the Sky Car is stuck. This is the engineering zone, the death zone. Highly differentiated, not very relevant to real people. Got to watch that, not to pick on engineers. But in many ways, engineers are actually compensated and encouraged to come up with those crazy ideas. They just need to be tempered with some research. That's okay. That's still good innovation. Let's talk about the stuff at the top. What if we could actually create a portable plane that actually fits on a trailer? Would that do it for you? Does it have to be vertical landing and takeoff? If we can actually put it on a trailer and take it out of there? And what about a whole new dimension in the flying experience? The ability to actually bring the plane down on a body of water. Does that potentially open up a lot of things for people in cottage country? Would that be actually a primary reason why people with the income and ability to buy a plane would even think about buying a plane? How many of you have actually been on the 400 on a Friday evening, dreaming about what it must be like to be in one of those planes that you see above you going up to the Muskokas? I won't even repeat what some people actually say when they see that happen. It's a very big part of this. I'll get to your question in a second. I'll just get through this. This is what the Icon guys have come up with as a result of this. What they've done is they've looked at portability and floatability as being highly differentiated, highly relevant aspects of the product. This is the A5 Icon. Sounds like an aviation show. This is the A5 Icon. It actually looks like a Cobra attack helicopter. I mean, it's made of composite material. I'm going to go through at high speed a little bit about what it brings to the party. It's got visual appeal, I think that's certain. It's easy to fly. What do you notice about the interior? It looks like a Pontiac Sunfire inside. Or I'm being unkind, but it does look like a very, very simple sports car. The interior is designed by IDEO, who also had some very relevant experience designing Vern Rayburn's very light Eclipse jet recently, the Eclipse 500. This is a very, very interesting model when IDEO is actually putting together the interiors of planes. It has an optional parachute. If at some point you realize you don't want to be committed anymore, as I talked about earlier, to the flight, you can jettison. This, by the way, is not something that is unavailable on other planes. It's an option, but they will be pushing it from a safety point of view, I think, more than other planes, given the way that they treat it on their website. It floats, but it does it in a really interesting way. On the outside of this, what they've done is they've created a canopy that pops up so that I can fish from the inside of this thing. They've also got fins on the side so that people can come up on the side and greet me if I pull in. I can also hang out on the side the way I would on a boat or a jet ski. I can cork a beer over here. There should be a bottle opener here somewhere. The Canadian version will be shipped that way. But the other thing that I think is really important here is that it forms a dive platform. It's foldable. Electric wings that actually fold up. And lastly, it's portable. It goes on a trailer. Now, one of the things that many pilots will not admit, but those that I've talked to said, one of the limitations of being a pilot is you can't drink. But if you go to the Muskokas, this is really cool. Think about this. These are the jobs that need to be done. I could actually have a drink and actually enjoy some extra time with my family and come home with the whole family. Because my wife might have driven up in the big-ass SUV, and we're going to drive the plane home together, and I fly up after work, and it takes me basically 45 minutes to get up to the cottage from the island airport. These are the things you need to think about, because if you actually put yourself and empathize with the buyer, these are the jobs that need to be done. This is very cool. How does having a helicopter address those needs that I just talked about? It doesn't, because I can't get anywhere near the cottage because there's trees all over the place and power lines and everything else. The coolest thing about this, I think, of all is that the buy button works. Remember I talked about Paul Moeller's website last week? The buy button works on this. They're taking orders for this in 2010. This thing hopefully will be shipping. The thing I want to leave you with is just very, very quickly, I'm not going to go through this, but if you apply the Kim and Mayborn methodology that we saw with how to do circuses, you can go all the way from the circus industry to revolutionizing the personal aviation space using some good market models. What they're doing is basically saying, there's no pontoons in this equation. It's an integrated hull, which makes it far easier to fly. Any pilot will tell you that. Pontoons are just a disaster compared to an integrated hull. But it's very expensive. What they've done is a way, using composite materials, to bring an integrated hull down to earth for the price of around $130,000, $140,000, which is what this plane costs. There's no need for specialized fuel. Remember the Terrafugia? What does that mean if it doesn't need avgas? What are we talking about here? This is really cool. What happened here, and we're almost at the end, the FAA created a new sport aircraft category, which opened up the market for the A5 and the Terrafugia, which will qualify for that same licensed category and the same category for pilots. This actually is going to be what the folks at Icon are saying is the biggest change in aviation in the past 50 years, this new category, which will enable a number of manufacturers to comply in an easier way. You can get your pilot's license in a fraction of the time it normally would take to fly a Cessna on the A5 simply because of this new category. And also because they bragged that within 5 to 10 hours, you can learn very well how to fly this aircraft because of the ease of instrumentation and the ease of use and the way that the integrated hull works. If you don't believe me, type in the A5 icon on YouTube and watch the test flight video and how smooth the landings are. Only better that I've seen recently is the US Airways landing from the security cameras in New York. But literally, I think it was a better landing, the US Airways. On the customers, it scores a home run on the key requirements for buyer utility. The suppliers and partners network that these guys have hasn't been defined all that much, but I am going to presume that companies like Bombardier need to be looking at this in a very big way because of the picture I'm about to show you. They have somebody on their board that actually is the head of Mastercraft Boats. Why would this be interesting to a boat company? Is the boat business in good shape right now? Do the boat builders need to pay attention to this sort of stuff? I think they do. I'm going to get to that in 1 second. I just want to say, you know, what do you get when you put all these people together? An MBA from Stanford, a skateboard company founder, the Freeboard company, a product designer at IDEO, an F-16 pilot who flew for American Airlines, a hedge fund manager, a former engineer with Burt Rutan at Scaled Composites, who built all those wonderful planes that our friend Sir Richard Branson likes to fly around on. A lot of those experimental aircraft were pioneered by people like this guy, and also the head of sports marketing at Red Bull. What do you get when you put all these people together? You actually get a management team. What I want to talk about real quick is that you put these guys together and these are their backgrounds. This is unbelievable. I haven't seen this in a long time. If there was an A team, pardon the pun, this is it. And the board of directors is a who's who of the industry. Vern Rayburn, who pioneered the very light jet category, is on the board. He's not a competitor because it's a different category of airplane. They've got the head of Mastercraft Boats. For anybody in the tech community, you would know Esther Dyson. She's on the board here. A very wise move. They have one of the senior guys from IDEO on the board. These are the kind of people that are bringing some convergent thinking to this and actually looking at a breakout. I put these bios in just so you can have a little bit of fun later, but you know, the one that really kills me is actually the marketing guy who knows something about tin cans. You know, not Cessna 172s, but he took Red Bull from 5 million to 2 billion as per his bio as director of sports marketing. What does Red Bull do? Well, they make energy drinks and they have a product, we give you wings. That's kind of cool for the mass market, but it also ties in well to one of the bigger sponsorships that this guy has used for many years to build the brand. And that's those sport aircraft races. The ones where they go around the pylons, those really amazing planes. He's been in this market for a long time with a brand. He knows the buyers. He knows the way the game is played. And what he's bringing is a promotional brand overlay to this to make flying fun, to make it so simple that it's really becoming a lifestyle product. Imagine one of these pulling into the driveway. You look across the street, ooh, Bob's got something real cool here. Wow, things are going well over at Bob's house. This is very cool. I don't know. What do you think when you see this? This guy is an F-16 fighter pilot in the corner. He's the CEO. He built this innovation on the basis that he thought that most planes out there that he'd tried just didn't do it for him. Arguably, he's looking for performance. He says this thing is a pleasure to ride, and I actually believe him because he's an F-16 fighter pilot. His name's on this thing. He's an innovator, but that's where the best innovations come from. People that actually had this requirement. It's not necessarily the nerds at MIT. Is this a symbol of re-evaluation? I don't know. I don't think so. To be determined. Again, we'll let the market decide. The thing that I'm going to leave you with is I'm going to tie it back to that themes that we talked about earlier. Remember, I said just don't look at the political, economic, social, technological, environmental, capital trends and the buyer trends. You've got to look at the movie metaphor. You've got to think convergence. You've got to think about bringing two industries together if you possibly can. Because the best innovations are actually found at the boundaries of other categories. And you've got to think in a convergent way. A management team that's comprised of all of those people can do that. They can pull it off. The worst thing you can do as an innovator is actually to sit in your own box and think as an engineer about all of the things that you're going to build in your own little world with your own cognitive filters and not talk to people across disciplines, across functions, and across industries. That's actually terrible if you don't do that. You're missing the big plays. This is the movie pitch that I made up for this product, the A5, and it's inspiring. I think you'll agree. I hope you do. The Sea-Doo meets the sport plane, a new category of flying watercraft. Who would have thought? This thing, in my view, when I first saw it, when I saw this picture, and this is from the Icon company, it's actually a graphic. It looks a lot like a jet ski, but one guy is going back to the dock and another guy is going up in the air. It's unbelievable. And I have to say, I haven't seen a product like this in some time that really sort of nails it. It really is the real deal. So the point of all of this, it's about filing a flight plan for innovation, pardon the pun. It's about looking at those 5 major areas of your business. This hasn't been a journey over the past couple of weeks to look at how to come up with a flip brand or a catchphrase or a tagline. This hasn't been about how to use social media to build your awareness in the market. I mean, those are only some aspects of marketing. What I've tried to do is really focus on the things that matter at the formative areas of where you're trying to figure out what customers really want and how you're going to do it in competitive markets that are often very, very complex. Thanks very much.